over a little bit about Zoom. Excellent. We'll go over a little bit about how we're going to work together today. So we do ask that you please put your full name in the Zoom profile. We want to know who you are and we want to be able to address you properly. So if you happen to have iPhone, what number is iPhone on now? I'm an Android user, iPhone like 21 in your name, please change it to your real name. We don't want to call you iPhone. Arrive early to troubleshoot any technology issues. Thank you to everyone who showed up on time. Mute your microphone to avoid feedback. Sometimes there's just distracting background noise. Please resist multitasking. We know it's really tempting to, check your emails or just do whatever while you're on these Zoom meetings, but we would really like to have you totally engaged. So if you could turn your video on, put any questions, comments in the chat, or just raise your hand. We mean for this to be fairly interactive. We want you to get involved. So please go ahead, chime in anytime you like by typing in the chat, putting up your hand so you can open your mic. Oh yes, if you could put your pronouns in your name as well, that would be really helpful. If anyone needs closed captioning, that's available. We are going to be doing some breakout groups today as well. I think everyone knows how to use all of these features by now. If you don't, you can message our wonderful tech support, Amrit, and she'd be happy to help you out with troubleshooting anything. Same with the gallery view. All right, so let's go over a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. So we've done our welcome and introduction. We're going to do a short icebreaker in a second, and then we're going to do a lecture, Intro to Organizing. So for some people, this might be a refresher. Maybe you're a pretty experienced organizer. This is probably going to be pretty basic for you. For other people, this might be the first time you're hearing it. So we know that there are a variety of skill levels in this group. This group is suitable for everyone. So this training will get, progressively it's going to build on itself. But for now, you might find that this is a bit of a refresher for you. We're going to do a breakout. We're going to have an activity for that. And then we're going to report back. We're going to hear about all the things that you learned in your breakout group, and then we're going to do a summary of worth learning. So we really like to get your feedback after every session because we're going to be here for 6 weeks together. We want to get your feedback so we can make sure that we are improving and continuing to meet all your needs as we go. So that said, then we're going to pop out into our icebreaker. Take about 1 minute per person to tell us your name, where you're joining from, what is it that you do, and that can be anything. We leave it open on purpose. That can be a job, it can be volunteering, it can be your advocacy work, whatever is important to you. And describe yourself with a verb that uses the first letter of your name. So, for example, I could be Magnificent Melanie, and Amrit could be the Amazing Amrit. The Amazing Amrit is about to put us into breakout groups so that we can do this activity. See you all back in a minute. All right. Everyone, I will reshare my screen. All right. Can everyone see the slides? Yeah, okay. Usually the little green outline shows up, and this time it didn't. So it's like, is it showing? Is it working? All right. So we are going to talk very briefly about what it is we're going to be trying to accomplish over the next 6 weeks. So we have our series agenda. So today is going to be Introduction to Organizing, as we spoke about. Session 2, we're going to talk about public narrative. So that's your story. That's kind of central to this training and what we're going to be building on going forward. Then we're going to talk about some recruitment, how you can bring people into your team to be able to achieve the change that you want, the strategies and tactics that you'll be using, and then teams and actually taking action, because that's the purpose of this training, right? Is to get you prepared to be able to actually take action on the issues that you care about. So I'm going to ask Amrit to pop a link into the chat real quick. So we need everyone to fill out a registration form. Thank you to everyone who already did so. If you did not, please go ahead and click on the link that's going to be in the chat. This is really important to us for a few reasons. We need to be able to know a lot of this information. It's going to tell us if you have any accessibility needs. It's going to help us gain a better understanding of who is in our training. So we do need everyone to fill out this form. So like I said, if you haven't yet, go ahead, click on the link and fill it out. All right, ICL's vision. So this is our vision for what we want to achieve. So people seeking social justice create change in Canada by learning practical and effective organizing skills. So that's what we're going to be doing. We are going to help you build those practical and effective organizing skills so that you can seek social justice and create change in Canada. And we have trained over 100 trainers recruited and developed from diverse cultural and professional backgrounds. We're very proud of our team and everyone who's been a part of our training so far. So for today's team, I'll introduce myself real quick because I've been talking at you without even telling you my name. My name is Melanie Matthews. I'm your lead instructor. And I'm going to be joined by Rob Johannes, who's also one of our lead instructors. He's going to talk a bit more during the strategies and tactics because he is brilliant at it. So I have been with ICL for about 4 years now. I am a registered social worker and I am a person who has experienced homelessness. So I am very excited to be working with this group. I think that housing advocacy is incredibly important. It's something that I've been actively involved in. And so I'm really excited to see what we're going to be doing. And joined today, we also have our facilitators, Tegan, Sandra, Graham, and Dawn. And the amazing Amrit is doing our tech for us. So everyone here has a wealth of experience in organizing and storytelling. So we are very grateful to have all of them with us. So let's jump right into it. 3 critical questions for organizing. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? When I am for myself alone, what am I? And if not now, then when? So these are the questions that we ask ourselves when we're going into any sort of organizing or advocacy work. And I guess we talk a lot about leadership, but we don't actually define what we mean by leadership. So leadership is taking responsibility for enabling others to achieve purpose in the face of uncertainty. So that's really what we're looking to do. We want everyone here to feel that sense of responsibility and have the ability to be able to work with others, to be able to achieve purpose. So leadership that enables your people to turn their resources into the power that they need to make the change that they want. I understand I'm throwing a whole bunch of quotes at you, but this is really kind of central to what it is we're trying to do. This is what drives our strategy for how we do organizing and advocacy work. Enabling your people to turn their resources into the power that they need to create the change that they want. We're going to talk a little bit about the organizer's journey. So what exactly does organizing look like? Like I said, this might be a refresher for some people, but for others, this might be the first time we're seeing it. So we'll go into it in a little bit more depth. So the first step to the organizer's journey is identifying what the problem is. If we're looking to create change, we need to know what the issue is so that we can actually work towards addressing that issue. So in this case, we're talking centrally about housing. What are the problems with housing? I'd say that if we boil it all down to what is the problem with housing, it's that there isn't enough of it, and what there is, people can't afford. So obviously it's much more complicated than that, and everyone here is going to be working on different issues that have to do with housing. So your issue that you're working on might be more specific than that, but we need to identify what it is that we want to change. So what is the problem? So your public narrative, what is your story? Why is it that you care about housing? Obviously, we all need housing to live. So I think that everyone is in touch with housing issues in some way. But what is your story? How did you get involved in this? Why do you care? What are you trying to convey to other people? And we're going to talk about this a lot more in our second session on public narratives. Building relationships. Who are your people? Who is the constituency that you're working with? Who are the people that you are trying to bring together to enable them to build power to create change? We've said that housing is an issue that impacts everyone, but not everyone is going to be a part of your constituency. You want people who are like-minded, who want something similar to what you want, and who are looking to actually get actively involved. Not everyone has the capacity to actually join into organizing work. So your constituency are going to be the people who are part of your community who actively want to work towards change. Structuring leadership, building your teams, you need to know what everyone is capable of and what they can do. So I spoke about our team and how we all have a wealth of experience. We have Amrit, who is absolutely wonderful at tech and the back end support. We have some people who have actually led to organizing change within their workplaces or communities. We have all kinds of people who have different skills and different things that they do. So when you're structuring leadership and you're building your teams, you want to know who you are working with, what their talents are, and how you can best use them to be able to create the change that you want. And strategizing, how do we turn the resources that we have into what we need, which is the power to get what we want, which is achieving our goals. So there's all kinds of different strategies that we can use. I'm giving a very brief overview here, and I don't even know how to give a brief overview into strategizing because it is so in depth. There is so much, that you need to do strategy. That's why we have an entire session on it. So when we boil it down, how can we turn what we have into what we need to get what we want? That's what we're talking about when we talk about strategizing. In action, mobilizing and deploying resources. This is the biggest step, is actually going out there and putting your strategy into action, into mobilizing your team to be able to create the change that you want. It's a really difficult step, and so it's one that we will also talk about in depth in our last session. So here's a really complicated looking slide. There's all kinds of different arrows and things moving around here. I think that this is difficult to read, but also kind of actively describes the way that organizing is. There isn't a straight line. There's all kinds of wiggles and wobbles and things that happen along the way. It would be really great if we could come up with a plan and just execute it perfectly. But there's a lot of steps that have to be taken along the way, lots of wiggles and wobbles and things that happen. But generally speaking, we're looking to move our resources towards our goals. So we're going to use our shared story, our shared commitment, a shared structure, shared strategy, and shared action. And through that, we're going to mobilize our constituency that we were talking about by tapping into our shared values, all the things that we want to accomplish together. So you notice that we use the word shared an awful lot. That is really what we need when we try to do advocacy work and when we want to be leaders in advocacy, is we are joining people together using their values, their shared stories, all of the things that are mobilizing them to really care about the advocacy work that you're doing. So it is all very shared. It's very collaborative. We're all working together on this. So our practices for leadership. There's two stages of leadership that we talk about in this course. So there's building power and using power. And both are very essential. So we don't just jump right in to taking action. Instead, we have to build our power first. So that's with the first steps that we're talking about. So building your story, understanding what your public narrative is and how to use that to mobilize others to take action. Building a structure. It's really complicated when you're working in a big team. It would be great, again, if we could just get everyone together and have them immediately have their shared goals and take action on it, but that's really difficult. So we are going to have to talk a lot about team building, how to use people effectively, and how to build in structure to your relationships. And speaking of relationships, we have to build them. Your constituency might be, people that you already know. It could be people within your workplace, within your community. They could be people that you already have a relationship with, but they also might not be. So we're going to have to build relationships with people, understand them better, know who you're working with. And only then will we be able to use the power that we have. We've built all of these, the structure and the relationships. We have all of these resources. And now we have to come up with a strategy. What is it that we want to accomplish and how are we going to do it? And only then can we really use our power and take action. So it's a journey. Leadership in action. we're reiterating this again. So we're doing all of those things. We are going through the entire journey, and the reason we're doing it is so we can take responsibility to enable others to achieve purpose in the face of uncertainty. And we do want to emphasize the face of uncertainty as well. Housing can be a very difficult topic for a lot of people to talk about. When the consequences of housing advocacy not working is people becoming homeless, it's a very sensitive topic. It's very uncertain. And so we want to help empower those people who are facing uncertainty to be able to use the resources they have to achieve that purpose. So I have mentioned it a couple of times, the words community or constituency. So I want to go in a little bit more depth on what that actually means. So community is people with shared values or interests. So the community can be anything, right? It could be the community that you live in. We have shared values and interests. We all want to live here, maybe. I could probably live somewhere else and also be perfectly happy. But generally speaking, we have a vested interest in this community. We're all living here. We all probably want things like clean water and electricity and all of that stuff in our shared community. But it's not just geographic area. It could also be your workplace. That's community as well. You have shared values and interest in being there. Everyone wants to be paid and have a safe work environment. It could also be another community that you're a part of. Perhaps you're part of the LGBTQ plus community. That's a community. Like me, maybe you're a member of a profession that has a community. I'm a social worker. We have a number of different associations and people that are all working together on the same thing. Or I should say not necessarily working together, where we all have the same values. We're all social workers. We're all part of the association. So these are all people with shared values and interests. They're communities. But a constituency is a community of people who are working together with a common purpose. So I might have some shared interests with the people in my geographic community, but we're not really working on anything together. I don't know my neighbors super well. We're not actually trying to accomplish anything together. Even when the power goes out, we don't all go knock on each other's doors and try to help each other out. We're all here, we're all part of the community, but we're not really working together. But a constituency are people who are working together. So if you are in a workplace that is attempting to unionize, the people who are working together to unionize, you have shared values and interests, you're all in the same workplace, and you have a common goal that you're working together to try to achieve. So that's the difference between a community and a constituency. Community are people with shared values and interests. Constituency is a community that's actually working together to achieve a common goal. So when we're doing organizing, we don't just want a community, we want a constituency. So people, this is the snowflake model. This is the model that ICL does their organizing and advocacy work. So the snowflake model distributes leadership and develops new leaders all the time. So there's a number of different models for leadership. Some of them are pretty dependent on one person. The snowflake model is not necessarily. There is one person who's in the center. They are the leader, they're the organizer, and then they have a team around them. And this team might be specialized in certain ways. So, using the example of a workplace, you have, your executive director in the middle, and then you have your upper management team. You have someone who's really good at communications. You have someone who does operations. You have someone who does, program development. These are your core team. And then from there, they have the people that they supervise. So the communications person has a team of people who are going to work on communications. The operations person is going to have a team working on operations. The program director is going to have a team that's working on delivering programming. So the snowflake model assumes that it starts with one person who's at the center, and then it branches out to people who are more specialized and who are doing the work on the ground. So in that way, the knowledge isn't held all with one person. There's one person at the center for sure, but there's all of these other people who also have knowledge and resources that they're using. So it's not a dictatorship. They're not telling everyone what to do. They're working together collaboratively, but with someone at the center to really facilitate the decision-making that's happening. So that's the model that we that we believe in and that we find works really well. So that's the model that we're going to help you develop. When we're talking about structuring teams and using the resources that your constituency has, we're organizing them into the snowflake model. Power. In organizing, we assume injustices exist because of an imbalance of power. So the challenge of an organizer is to turn resources of our people into power. So that's what we assume. Using housing, we assume that there are injustices in housing because of an imbalance in power. There are some people who have a lot of power and they are able to dictate who has housing and who does not. And there's people who have less power, and they're the ones that are very vulnerable to things like experiencing homelessness or renting with no hope of ever being able to buy. The people who are spending more than 30 or 50% of their salaries on rent. We assume that there's an imbalance of power there. There's someone at the top who is dictating who gets housing and who does not, and we are looking to turn resources of our people into power so that we can right some of that injustice, so that we can make sure that everyone has housing. The role of stories. So this really structures our entire model here. So there are three elements to organize, and we've got the head, we've got the heart, and we've got the hands. So the head is the how. That's the strategizing, that's the tactics, that's the actual how are we going to carry out this work. And that's really great. We need that. We need that structure in order to be able to actually carry out our advocacy work. But just as necessary is the heart, which is the why. Why should people care about this issue? We could come up with the best plan in the world, but if we don't appeal to people's hearts, if we don't let them know why this is important and why they should care, we're probably not going to be able to mobilize them to actually take action. So we've got the head, the how, we've got the heart, the why, and when both of those work together, we're able to bring them together to the hands, which is actually taking action. So we need all three of those. In our program, our training here is going to talk about all of them. So we're talking very much about the how right now. We're talking about the organizer's journey and how we get there. And then next week, when we talk about public narrative, we're going to hit more on the why, the storytelling, the heart. And then by the end, we're going to be able to take action. Change. Clear goals that create concrete change in the world. This is a big part of what we're going to talk about today. So in order to be able to achieve the change that we want, we need to have clear goals. We could, have a slogan. We could talk about, we want housing for all. Well, what does that mean exactly? What are we trying to achieve? What are the goals that we're going to set in order to be able to get there? So we are going to talk about coming up with some real concrete goals that we can use to build our structure to be able to create the change that we're trying to achieve. And that leads us into our organizing statement. So this is how we work through setting clear goals to be able to structure our change. So for our organizing sentence, we are, who are we organizing? Who is your constituency? What are you trying to do? How are you going to do it? And by when? So this is what we are going to work together to be able to create today. So to lay it all out, we are organizing who to do what through what strategies by when. That's the sentence we're going to come up with. Oh, I keep accidentally moving the slide. There we go. Sorry.
Melody,
Yeah.
maybe what's the point of coming up with this sentence, right? Like,
Yeah.
why do we care about doing this in the first place?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we need it to be able to organize ourselves to understand what it is we're trying to do. So if we don't have a clear understanding of who it is that we're organizing, what we're trying to do, how we're going to do it, and by when, we're kind of just floundering, right? We don't have a clear goal, we don't have a clear understanding, and we can't really communicate that clearly with our team. So it makes it really hard to facilitate organizing or any sort of advocacy work if you don't have an organizing statement. So I think that maybe what we could do is do an example of maybe not a great organizing statement, and then we can come up with a much better one. So actually, Graham, you have singled yourself out here, my friend. You're going to help me come up with an organizing statement that is not great and one that is really great. So, Graham, I know you've done some advocacy work before. What kind of goal have you had in the past? What have you been trying to achieve?
Oh boy. I mean, there can be a few. um oh dear. Yeah, there've been a few. But ooh, yeah, there've been a few. What sort of consumed my life for the last year and a half or so is trying to like organize my workplace and get us a like fair contract. So that's sort of the big goal that's been looming over my head for a while now.
Mhm. Okay, so yeah, that is a pretty big goal, but not a super well-defined one. So what you've said here is that you are trying to, I'm going to actually stop screen sharing or stop. Um, there we go.
There you
It's the annoying thing about PowerPoint is you can't type on it when it's in the like big mode. So instead, you're going to have to see this kind of annoying one with all of the slides on the side. So Graham, you've said that your goal here is to get a good contract at your workplace. So that's your goal. That's what you're trying to do. Who are the people who are involved in this?
Yeah, so there's roughly 20 employees at a like a gay bathhouse in downtown Toronto. So yeah, let's say like the 20 employees. Let's go with that.
At a bathhouse. And how are you going to achieve it? Keeping in
Well,
mind we're doing the not great one
we're doing the
first.
not great one, right? So
Yeah.
let's say, well, one thing that people had tried for a long time was, asking the management to fix things, right? To make things better.
Ask management to fix it. And when are you going to achieve it?
I mean, like I think especially if we go back talking to people who've had some of the similar issues for a long time, I eventually, soon, as soon as we
Then
can.
we'll get to it. I
Yeah,
mean, there's other stuff going on. You've got to like actually do your work in the day, right?
exactly. Yeah, so,
You'll get to it.
we'll get to it. Yeah, exactly.
So this is an example of not a great organizing statement. We've got 20 employees. They want a good contract. They're going to ask management to fix it, and they'll do it eventually. Um, so
Does
let's talk
anyone
about.
maybe let's throw it out there. Like, can anyone, and you can raise your hand, you can write it in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with. What are some of the issues that we see with this? What's maybe not flushed out enough, or maybe is confused. Any thoughts? Yeah, Natasha.
The first thing that jumps out at me is really defining what a good contract would mean for you or those employees.
Yeah. And why do you think that's important?
I think it's important because it might look different across the 20 employees, right? Based on priorities, what is a good contract? It might be hard to define and come to a consensus around what it is that you're actually advocating for.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great example. That's a not example, but that's a great point to raise. That if you're just one person who's trying to come up with what the solution is, that's never going to be as effective as if you get more people involved, right? You need to start building that team. You just need to start building those relationships and actually make it a collective project of figuring out what your objectives are going to be, right? So yeah, that's a great observation. So let's say a couple of some of the top things that came out when we were starting to have those conversations in terms of what our goal was would be uh have the like respect the law on like fire safety, so stop having the company exceed the capacity limits. That's one pretty concrete goal. access to good personal protective equipment, so things like gloves, like cleaning products. And the third one, having people go home with a living wage, right? Because living wage and a fair wage, so that it's consistent, so that some people who are friends with the owner or whatever aren't making several dollars more an hour than people who are doing the same job or more demanding jobs. So that there's a great observation, fleshing that out, making it a bit more specific. Does this seem like something that we'd be able to, we could tell whether we've won it or not? Yeah, probably. We got a few itemized pieces. We'd probably be able to figure out, okay, like, have we reached our goal or not? Anyone else? What are some, so we fleshed out what the goal a bit. How about any of the other pieces? What else needs to be changed? Jose, yeah.
I don't know where this falls. I think it falls in how, but the question that comes to mind is what happens when the goal fails? So in the how, when we ask management and management says, thanks, but no thanks, what happens? So I'm thinking, I'm going to use the how section, but the question that I come up with is what happens when it doesn't work?
Yeah, well, do we think that this would work if we ask them politely? Yeah, Melanie's face says it all, I think. Yeah, absolutely not. Of course not. Are you crazy? So what's something else that might be able to get this goal? What's a different strategy that maybe we should try? Anyone, throw something out there. Fiona, oh, it helped the customers know about the working conditions. Oh, that could be a part of it. Absolutely. So that could be a piece. Is that in of itself going to force the company to make the change?
No, I mean, I guess you'd have to give the customers kind of, sometimes we have to actually like provide what it is we want them to do. Like, do we want them to call management and make a complaint? Do we, yeah, like how, it's not, you're right, it's not just enough for them to know, but.
Yeah, so that's good. You want to get people involved with like a call to action. Absolutely. That's a good piece of it. But what else? Petition outlining the specifics. A petition can be good. Yeah, absolutely. The sort of overarching strategy that we wound up deciding on was to unionize. And so as a piece of getting that in place, yeah, we did some public outreach. We got customers involved and aware of what we were going after. Absolutely. Understanding the company's incapacity, yeah, that's a piece of understanding sort of the details in the end. Absolutely. But overarching strategy was to unionize, and then we're in a position to legally bargain, and then all these other pieces can be a part of that campaign. Someone else has their hands out. Joanna.
I was going to say strike.
Yeah, I mean that sounds good. Unionize and strike. Yeah.
And to kind of address Jose's original question here too, sometimes this escalates over time as well. So you might start off by asking management, and when they say no, you're going to get the customers on your side and get them to also ask management. If management still says no, then you're going to unionize. If by the time you unionize, you're still not able to negotiate a fair contract, then you're going to go on strike. So all of these things kind of escalate over time. You might have an original strategy that just doesn't work. So you have your escalation over time for what you're going to continue doing. And as by our organizing statement or our organizing sentence here, it's not static. It doesn't always stay the same. You might end up with an additional who in your constituency. So you want to include them as well. Your goal might change a little bit. Maybe you want to add some stuff. And your how will definitely change over time too. And you might find that it works really well for one thing, but not others. Maybe once you unionize, you get the living wage and fair wage, but they're still not respecting the fire safety laws. So you might try to try something different for that aspect of your goal. Yeah, Alexa, see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to expand on the idea that you need to know what the company wants or needs in terms of, is it economic dollars, shareholders? Is it corporate social responsibility? Do they have an image that they're trying to keep up, right? There has to be something that affects them if by whatever action you do. If it doesn't affect their bottom line, their reputation, their sense of self, right, their brand, then it's just not going to be effective.
Yeah,
great observation, and absolutely. So I think all the elements that people have brought up are maybe a little more sensitive to that than like what was the original like strategy was to just like ask politely, right? That doesn't involve understanding the relation of power. It doesn't understand it doesn't involve understanding the company's interests and their own vulnerabilities and their pressure points. And when we get into strategy and tactics later on in this workshop series, we're going to dive into all this in way more detail. But I think this is a great way to sort of flesh out how is it we plan to achieve it. Well, we need to actually have a strategy that beyond begging, right? Anyone want to maybe suggest something for the who or the when? Well, how can we flesh this out a little more? How about eventually? Is that is that good enough for our timeline? It'll happen.
I find the timeline a hard one because within 2 years, I mean, that's probably a reasonable time frame to assume that you're going to achieve your end goal for sure. It is probably going to take a little bit of time. Getting all of your employees together, convincing them that a union is a good idea, figuring out how to do it, and then eventually getting there, it's going to take some time for sure. But we don't want to wait for 2 years to make that happen. We want to set some pretty specific timelines. So when does change need to happen? That could be like your first step for change. So maybe it'll take 2 years to get to the end of your goal, but we're going to meet for the first time next week on Friday. Like we want to get real specific with this, and this is definitely one that's going to change because your timeline is going to move all the time. We're going to have our first meeting next Friday at 3 p.m. Before we all start work. That's what we're going to do. We want to set some short, medium, and long-term goals. Alexa says, yes, absolutely. We need to have our short-term goal if we're going to meet for the first time and get organized. Our medium-term goal is probably going to, I mean, there's going to be a bunch of them in the meantime. You want to set some timelines for that. And then your long-term goal, yeah, it might take up to 2 years, maybe even longer to actually get to your end goal. But we want to make sure that we have a timeline. And you don't have to hold yourself to it super rigidly. If things come up, you can absolutely be flexible. But we do want to see that timeline because if you don't set those clear goals, if you don't tell people we're going to meet next week on Friday, nobody's ever going to show up. You're just going to be stuck in that eventually stage.
Yeah. And now, how about we jump back to the who, right? Are we getting all 20 people to come together and actively work on this, right? Ideally, but is that necessarily realistic?
I think you need to do an analysis of the kind of who the employees are. Like if there's only one or two friends of the owner, then that's a different situation if it's fully half friends of the owner. And then we can look at roles and see what they want. And then kind of who lunches with who, stuff like that.
Yeah, so all of that is a part of what we're going to need to do. Let's say in terms of like a core team of people, like not the whole, not the overall like community, but the core team. We had maybe like 5 people, so we're getting like 5 let's say 5 employees representing all the different shifts, all the different job areas as like the core team, and then reaching out to like a minimum like 3/4 of the workforce before moving ahead, right? So that gave us you have a predefined like core group of people who sort of figuring out, okay, like what are the common goals, what are the common needs, being able to have the information to come up with that strategy, right? And then we also have a pretty clear sense of what's our minimum threshold for, you know, the support that we're going to need to win, right? How's the, you know, that's a little more specific than just saying all 20 of the people, right? Because you're not going to get all 100% of the like employees to be actively involved in the campaign, at least not at first. You know, ideally over time you get there, but you're not going to wait until you get that to start moving forward, right? So Melanie, how does this organizing sentence compare to what we had at first?
I think this is a much better organizing sentence. I think this is clear. It's very descriptive. It sets goals that we can measure, and it has a timeline for when we're going to achieve it. So absolutely, this fits much better into the model that we're trying to work with. So this is great. Thank you, everyone, for collaborating on this. All right. So we're going to take a short break so that everyone can take some time, stretch, use the bathroom, grab some water if you need it. And we are going to be back, I think, by 7 o'clock. All right, welcome back, everyone. How did everyone feel about that activity? Good, bad, good, neutral? Yeah, yeah. That's the way it goes with organizing sometimes, yeah. All right, we are going to hear from all of the groups then. We are doing very well for time, so we will have time to hear from everyone. So we will have someone present from each group, and then some of the facilitators might have a couple of questions for you, maybe to expand on some of your answers, understand a little bit more, offer some coaching going forward. And I am literally just going in the order that the slides appear on my screen. And so Graham, your group is going to be up first. I think you said Peter. I'm just going to share my screen real quick because Peter, you are not obligated to have memorized your organizing statement. All right.
Okay, sorry, just doing a little shuffle on the screen. I'll try and stare at the right camera for a while there. What we discussed is basically that we're working on creating housing that's strongly supportive. So identifying clients that require quite a bit of support and moving those out of shelter and into housing options. So clearly in terms of who we need to organize around this, definitely people with lived experience, advocates for this, and our frontline workers, all those people who have been doing the job in the shelter and understand these clients so well. And partner organizations as well that can, you know, help us validate what we're trying to do based on experiences they've had. So ultimately, we want to secure funding to acquire and maintain property and operating support for permanent housing options for people needing high levels of support. And how will we go about it? We will get constituents to pressure city councilors to fund it, develop a model that we can use to educate on how we can accomplish this, and ultimately work with other groups to get some endorsement on that model so that it is validated. And certainly reaching out to constituents through social media and door-to-door canvassing and other activities like the blanket exercise, which I didn't have time to go into to understand fully. So perhaps Graham will comment on that a little more. Ideally, we'll be in a position by the end of the year to actually have some of these properties available, and are very interested in seeing if we can get this funding into budget 2026, which would be before the next election year.
Very cool. I like it. As a former shelter worker, I am immediately invested in what you're trying to accomplish here.
I will be adding you to the who then.
Perfect. Graham, do you want to talk about this blanket exercise? I'm interested to hear what that means.
I think it was Alexa in our group who suggested that. So Alexa, do you want to share that briefly?
Sure. So when Kairos, which is a Canadian-wide or advocacy group around Indigenous rights, wanted to get buy-in, they created a simulator experience that they then took mostly to faith groups, but then larger groups. And essentially you experienced what it might be like at first contact from the Indigenous point of view. And they developed that with people with lived experience. And it essentially was people came with a blanket and they put it out as if it was their territory. And slowly through the statistics and the story, the history, the territory shrunk. The people were forced to smaller and smaller spaces. And it's a very, very moving experience for the most part. When people go through that experience, they come away with the statistics, the history, and an emotional investment in doing something different. And so I've often had this dream, and if anybody wants to organize it with me, of a housing simulator experience that we could take, so you're a refugee, you just arrived, so you got unemployed and now you're homeless, and within 5 minutes of the game, everybody's homeless. And we're looking for shelter beds, we're looking for food, we're struggling with various issues together. Use the stats, use the everything to actually do a simulator of homelessness with the idea that, okay, so this sucks, what can we do better? And you then use that to create change and voter support.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Alex, I can see you have your hand up.
Yes, so I've actually participated in a workshop similar to that, to what you're describing doing, of kind of going through a day as someone who is currently homeless, and you have to, it walks you through everything, and it's called system storytelling. I think it's also called the poverty challenge in some cities, but anyway, just wanted to mention it. It's the Alliance to End Homelessness who's done it. And so, you go to one table to try to get ODSP, you go to one table to try to get housing for the night, and you have to go to another table to get a translator, and it just takes you throughout the day. And we had it at a university campus, so you really had to go outside and walk to all the different areas to try to feel as much impact as you could in that kind of environment. But I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, that's really cool. It sounds like there could be a really interesting simulation that comes kind of from both of them, because it sounds like the one from the Alliance to End Homelessness is quite practical. You go to this different place and you go through the systems, and then the one that Alexa's talking about is very culturally oriented. It'd be really cool if you could combine both of them and come up with something that's very rooted in storytelling, but also has the facts and the statistics and the reality of the situation as well. That is so cool. I love that. Because what I was saying to Peter was, as a former shelter worker, I am immediately on your side. So I'm a great ally. I'm already there. But there are lots of other people out there who are maybe kind of on the fence. They might be sort of neutral. Maybe they vaguely support housing issues, but don't really know what they're talking about because they've never experienced it. This would be a great way to move people into being allies. And we're going to talk about that. I'm getting way ahead of ourselves. That's way later in the course. But we're definitely going to talk about that more. So keep all of these in mind, because they're going to come up again later. But this is excellent. Yeah, great organizing statement. Love it. All right, shall we move on to the next one, which is my group. So Alex, you just got done speaking and now you're going to speak again for us. Go ahead.
So we were focused on organizing people who are most affected by housing issues. So we decided Toronto Community Housing Units would be our primary focus. And why we wanted to do this is to focus on how you get people engaged on housing issues, but the people who are most affected by it, who probably don't have the time to be as politically engaged as people with stable housing do. So we're organizing people living in Toronto Community Housing Units, as I mentioned, building a core team from those units and getting them involved in leadership models, the or leadership roles, sorry, and then we reference the snowflake model. Our goal is to vote for a specific candidate in the mayoral election. We focused it around Toronto, just to give a practical example. Engage people in TCH in conversation regarding what they want from their housing. So whether that's more units, shorter wait lists, pest control, and we decided how that would need to be done is a town hall, because people in those units know best what they need. So we would have some type of forum to go over that, and we want to account for all accessibility issues when it comes to hosting events like that. And then we went into, for the actual election, we want to make it fairly simple and easy to understand the election process. So using sample ballots, accessible instructions, making it clear where they need to vote, how they need to vote, and who we think they should vote for, and when does change need to happen on election day. But we also identified that early voting is always great for organizing. So.
Thanks, Alex. Do any of the other facilitators have some questions that they want to ask our group? Because I guess I could, but I've already asked all of my questions because I was there.
I think that if your time frame is to do something during the mayoral election, I think that there is doing something that's focused on trying to turn out votes from TCH like units is a really smart idea, because you know where to find them. And in my experience of canvassing, it's I always really like it when I'm canvassing Toronto community housing blocks, because you know where to go. There's a lot, it tends to be high density. It's not like, canvassing in East York where you spend a lot of time just like walking along the sidewalk from place to place. So, hey, you get a big bang for your buck by like focusing on like TCH development. So that seems really smart. What do you think? I guess my question is, are you what's the goal out of the mayoral election, right? So you want to get them to vote for a specific candidate. That's maybe like part of how you get to the goal, but like what's the point of doing that, right? Like what's the overarching objective?
Yeah, I guess that's something we could have identified more in the goal when it. Oh, Jose, do you want to go and answer that?
I think there's it's hidden and within, but I think because municipal government and city council is the one that's responsible for the budget of Toronto community housing. So I think that's what unites the two, but also because it was a very real example of a very real election that's happening.
Yeah. Let's say what's the goal of getting good turnout from community housing to vote for a specific candidate? Why do you want them to vote for that specific candidate?
Well, it would be a candidate we identified that would, prioritize new developments. They would prioritize, better condition, like mandatory better conditions, and, they could legislate requirements when it comes to repairs, pest control, and all of that. So I think in the goal, we talked about it a bit, but identifying a candidate who is strongly focused on that and has a history of that support. And we could do that through surveys, or I don't know, I'm not from Toronto, so I don't know, but there's lots of organizations here who already do those surveys, so you can see what the candidates answer to those questions.
So
Yeah.
Maybe the goal is for that candidate to win.
That's a good point.
Right. So maybe the goal is you want to have a mayor who's going to take action on behalf of community housing residents.
That is a really good point, Graham, because that is, I think that was really hidden kind of through what we were talking about was we don't want people to just show up at the polls and vote for anyone. We want them to vote for the person that's really going to advocate for them. And like ultimately the reason we want enough people to show up is so that candidate wins. Like it's not enough to just like vote for them. We want them to win. So that's a very good point. Thank you, Graham. Sometimes the answer is so close to your face that you just miss it. All right, I want to make sure we have time for the last group. So let's move on to, I think it was Tegan's group, but I think it's on Rob's page. So who was going to be presenting from this group? Claire.
That's me. So I'm Claire. With our group, we found, I guess first foremost, that we are kind of from across Canada. So some local information was, I'm going to say vague. So in the context, who are we organizing? Potentially unions, people in our circle. The main idea was a cooperative housing complex taking over, developing a cooperative housing complex by taking over an existing building. So with that, one of the main steps would be finding an existing building. And then where does the federal response fit into the housing crisis? And where would that fit in with the multiple, I'm going to say local groups that are here in Toronto, whether it be, and if the house was in Toronto or in one of the suburbs, we would have to work with that. So to find the building, I'd like identify the target building. We'd be looking at flyers, looking at local, the local real estate market. Did it fit within boundaries that were available to us, subject to funding? So when does this change happen? We didn't really get to that, or as you can see, in working through the leadership team, our group, we were trying to come together on the opportunities of what it meant for our cooperative housing within our backgrounds. And I think when does the change happen? Ultimately, when all our research is done and working through what it meant to first find a building and then where did it fall within the parameters of the locale.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, my apologies. I started screen sharing before the edits had all been put in, so you probably didn't see all of it on the screen, but I have unshared now, so we should be able to see all of the work that you all did. So excellent. And it sounds like this particular project is going to be like kind of building one step after another. You have a bunch of groundwork that needs to be done first before you're going to get to your ultimate goal. So it kind of makes sense that maybe you don't have a totally defined when, but it sounds like you would need probably a few deadlines for when you're going to do things. Yeah, no, this is really good as well. Did any of the other facilitators want to ask any questions? All right, let us, yeah, Graham, I saw you unmuted.
Oh no, just an observation that, you know, you seems like, you know, you've already sort of identified that there are, you know, different levels of government that might be involved, right? So, you know, federal and also like local when it comes to, you know, identifying a particular building where you want to be you know, taking over as a co-op, right? So if you're thinking about, you know, when deadlines and like a time frame, looking at when those upcoming elections are municipally and federally might be like one way to help give some focus to that, right? Because people are going to be responsive if they feel that being responsive is going to help them win again. And so that might be like something that's worth looking up and thinking about in terms of, you know, working out that time frame. But yeah, this is good.
Yeah, I think that's a really good insight too, Graham, is talking about being strategic in your timelines. The example that we gave right at the beginning when we were talking about your particular campaign on unionizing the bathhouse, we just said our timeline is we're going to meet next Friday. But we can be real strategic about that. Like if we know that people are usually angry about their job on Friday nights and everyone goes out for drinks and they complain about everything, that would also be a great time to say, hey, I'm gonna host something that's really accessible that everyone's going to want to attend, and I'm going to have everyone over to talk to them because I know they're going to be real angry about it. And so that would be a good time to mobilize everyone. And it's the same with like elections too. That candidates are far more motivated to talk to their constituents when there's an election coming up. So being really strategic about your timelines, not just convenient, is a really good point as well. In some things, just picking a day when everyone is available is totally valid, but sometimes you want to be real strategic with your timelines. Cool. All right. Well, these were really excellent organizing statements, and we are going to move along to kind of the last part of our training, which is we want to know some feedback from you. What was your key learning from this training? I'm exiting the shared screen because we're going to type some things at the same time. Put it in the chat, put up your hand, open up your mic. We want to hear what was the most important thing that you learned in today's training. Fiona, go ahead.
Well, I think for me, it was a kind of reinforcement of, we've all heard about SMART goals, right? So yeah, what I appreciated was this breaking this down because it is so true. We're like, oh, the housing situation needs to change. Okay. Yeah, so it was just kind of good reinforcing the who, what, how, when. And we even had a question about where in our group too, right? So yeah, it was really good.
Amazing. Yeah. I see that a couple of times in the chat as well. The importance of a clearly defined goal. It can't just be, there's an issue with housing. It has to be really defined, what that means, what you're trying to accomplish, how, who, what, where, all of those things need to be included. Amazing. We've got a few others in the chat too, the ways that we might support one another and share ideas in organizing and housing. Yes, absolutely. That's why this is interactive, right? If we just wanted to teach you the concepts, we could make it a lecture. But we want this to be a group where everyone shares their knowledge and resources and brings what they have to the table. That you need to think strategically about short, medium, and long-term goals, connecting the need for social housing with the realities of social problems. Fantastic. Yeah. Anyone else have anything that they want to add?
I really liked Graham's comment and insight about like, okay, what does that accomplish? But what does that accomplish? Because you can get really excited about like a plan to do something and realize then that it's just like an intermediate step. I mean, I certainly would have been like totally on board with like try and get people to vote. It's like, okay, no, Christine, you got to focus on the win condition and like what do you need to get there? Was very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be talking more when we do strategies and tactics about awareness campaigns and how awareness is great. That's wonderful. But like, what are you actually trying to achieve? Because people being aware is not enough. They have to actually be taking action on something. So same kind of concept, right? We're not just doing the plan, we're doing the plan for a reason. That's cool. Great. All right, we're going to move on to the next bit of feedback, which we call it rosebud and thorn. So a rose is something that worked really well. You're real happy with it. You want us to do more of it. A bud is something that has potential, but maybe we didn't quite get there. And the thorn is something that we need to change. And this is very important. We want to hear all three of these things because we're going to be together for another 5 weeks. And if all we're doing is throwing out thorns, we need to make sure that we change that. So please let us know what are some roses, some buds, and some thorns. So that we can change up our strategy for the next session if we need to.
I think the breakout rooms worked well. It's a good way to get to know each other and speak without having to speak in front of everyone to begin with.
Yeah, the small groups and the discussion is always really nice. Anything else? I feel like there's always an awkward pause here because we're waiting for people to finish typing things out in the chat too. So if anyone wants to open up their mic, put up their hand, you can totally do that too.
I just really appreciated how we sort of settled in our group on a topic. That was just really nice to like come together with totally different perspectives, but just decide together on what to focus on.
You're already really excellent organizers, collaborating and coming together, shared values and resources. Rose appreciated the grounding and leadership concepts. Awesome. Any buds or thorns, anything that you want to see differently from us in the next sessions going forward?
I'm gonna use a word I like that not a lot of people like, and I'm gonna use the homework word in terms of like something that's a potential is adding a reading or a potential like suggested resource for when we're done here between now and next week to get our brains thinking, not just within these 2 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. So Amrit, I think that's something you might be able to help us out with because we do have a workbook and I believe we can send things out to people. Not everyone likes homework and so it's not super required, but if you are real keen on learning more and you want to stay engaged, absolutely we want to make sure that can happen.
100%. So in the email blasts that I did send out earlier, hopefully they didn't go to your junk mail. I'll be really sad if they did, but you should have received. And if you haven't received, a few emails from me that that included a link to this magical thing called Notion. And so we basically have this, I put the link in the chat, and it has like all of the relevant chapters in it with the workbook in it, like the relevant pages that you can read if you want to do the homework. It's not mandatory, you don't have to do it because we know that capacity is a thing. So it has the worksheets along with it as well, the page numbers that you should be reading that are associated with it. So then if you want to use that to prepare for the upcoming week, then yeah, you're more than happy to look at that as well. And after each session, so they're on Tuesday nights or Tuesday evenings on the Toronto or Eastern time. By Wednesday like afternoon each week you'll get the recording, the slide deck, and just the Notion link again, so that you guys have the next chapter. And what I can also do is just put it in the email text of, okay, in order to prepare, here's the next chapter plus the relevant worksheet if you want to take a look at it before the next session.
Amazing. Thank you, Amrit. I see that there are a few comments too about kind of the nationwide scope. And absolutely, that's going to be a challenge. Not everyone is working on the same issues. What we're hoping is that by mixing people up and having them work together, we might not be working on the same issues, but we can share different ideas and resources. Sometimes we end up in an echo chamber. I keep saying it in my groups. I'm very Toronto-centric because people in Toronto think that Toronto is the center of the universe. We are not. We are not the center of the universe. And so we really do like to hear from other people about what is happening. So it's always kind of a debate that we have. Should we divide people up by their geographic area because they'll likely be working on the same issues, or should we mix people up so that they can hear different perspectives and find out what people are doing across the nation? It is always a challenge, and we definitely welcome your feedback on that and what you prefer. So thank you for giving that. So keep putting things in the chat, and we are going to move on. Thank you for that feedback. So our next session, which will be next week, same time, same place, you will be getting some links sent out to you by Amrit. If you are not getting the links, if like Amrit is not a last minute person, You shouldn't be getting your first link 2 minutes before the session begins. So if you're finding that you're not getting the emails, reach out to us and let us know, or check your spam folders and mark us as a safe sender, because we will definitely be sending out more resources. Yeah, Amrit's popped her email in the chat. If you're having an issue with the emails, please reach out to us. We want to make sure that everyone has the things that they need in order to be able to join the sessions. This next session is a really fun one. It's going to be on storytelling and public narrative. So we will see you all again next week. Thanks for coming, everyone.